Welcome to the Influential Motherhood podcast. I'm your host, Melissa Duncan, and my dream is to inspire moms to pursue their goals and help them make a difference in their world. I'm a mom of 2 young boys, a wife to my high school sweetheart, and a lawyer. This show is a place to hear stories of moms working hard to have a positive influence in their profession or their community, and sometimes both, even as they juggle their responsibilities at work, at home, and to their children. You'll get tangible, practical tips for managing the chaotic world of motherhood and work. Come along as we hear these stories and feel inspired to step outside of our comfort zone as leaders and as a positive force within our communities. I believe that moms can change the world. Okay, so I'm here today with Deirdre Fitzpatrick, who is a news anchor who has had the great privilege, I think, of covering Olympics. She is a podcast host of Dying to Ask. She's an avid runner, a fellow Peloton girl, and so we might have to talk about that, and then mom of 2 boys. So, Deirdre, thank you so much for being on the Influential Motherhood podcast. I'm excited to have you here.
I am really thrilled to get to chat with you. I mean, anytime 2 moms can sit and talk and maybe learn a little something from each other, I think is a good night.
Exactly. I think so too. So that was I'm sure just a taste of what Deirdre does and is into and has been successful with. But why don't you just back us up a little bit and tell us a little bit more about yourself and your career path thus far and kind of how you got to where you are today.
Sure. So I am a television morning news anchor at KCRA TV, which is in Sacramento, California, so Northern California. And I have been anchoring our morning news show for around 20 years, which is super unusual. Like, you have a better chance of having lunch with a unicorn than lasting in my job. For a variety of reasons, the number one reason being burnout, because it's a really odd schedule to work. And I came to mornings in a really weird way. I moved around a lot as a kid. But the last place I lived with my family was North Texas. And I ended up at the University of Missouri to do a journalism degree. Went to Des Moines, Iowa after that as a broadcast journalist. I anchored evenings there, weekend evenings. And then on a lark, ended up in Sacramento. Had zero intention of ever going to Sacramento. So I ended up there very kind of accidentally. And I thought, that'll be a good place to go kill a year or two. And here I am 21 years later.
Goodness.
Life is funny. So when I went to KCRA, I truly did not expect to be there very long, but I had an opportunity to go to the morning show. And I was offered the job 3 times and I turned it down because I wanted nothing to do with getting up in the middle of the night. And I just didn't think it was a good fit for me. And I was talked into it by someone else, again, 20 years ago, who said, you got to trust me. This will be the best choice you ever make if you go to this job. And I said, no way. I don't want to do those hours. I don't want to do that job. And he said, life is changing. Our country is changing. The way we live is changing. And people are going to start getting up a lot earlier, and they're not going to stay up as late to watch news. This is where everything is going. And I just thought, really?
Yeah.
Really? And for whatever reason, I said yes. And he was right, because especially on the West Coast, people get up a lot earlier. We have longer commutes. The health movement really changed a lot in the last 10, 15 years. You hear people joke, 4 a.m. is the new 6 a.m., all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And it's true. So we have news that starts now at 4 in the morning and goes until 9 a.m. And we really it really is aligning more with people who work from home,
right.
Maybe moms who want to get up, get that workout in before they go to work or they get the kids going. So it ended up being a really unusual fit for me. And as it turns out, I'm totally wired to get up in the middle of the night, which is a weird thing. But for me, being a mom, it's ended up being a great schedule, because when my kids were little, I only was really gone for half of the day. And I was always available in the afternoon for the doctor's appointments and soccer practice and swim practice, all that super fun stuff like homework and that kind of thing. So, it's, while it isn't necessarily the path I would have charted for myself, it ended up being exactly the one I was supposed to be on. And then along the way, my company, I work for Hearst Television, and we own 30 stations across the country, and we do a lot of big projects. And I've been really fortunate that for the last 10 Olympics, I've been part of our Hearst Television Olympic team. So I've gone with a very small group, and we have covered the Olympics for those 30 stations. And that has been an amazing privilege that has taken me from Australia to Russia to London to Rio de Janeiro to Pyeongchang in South Korea just last year. So I have gotten to travel the world and cover incredible athletes and see amazing things, but still come back to Sacramento where my family is and have a sustainable, what I call a sustainable life,
Right.
a real doable life. So for me, while I'm not a big fan of believing in true balance, because I don't think a scale ever really balances, it has allowed me to have both of these lives and feel very fulfilled in each of those lives in a way that I think I was meant to do it.
That's amazing. And I can't wait to ask you more about the Olympics because I actually grew up figure skating and thought for a long time that maybe my coach might have me on a path towards very, very, very serious figure skating. And I stopped before it really got to that point. But I can't wait to talk with you about the Winter Olympics because you're talking to a true figure skating fan over here. So
I love it. I love it.
Yeah. So I'm curious, if you are on the 4 a.m. news, what time do you have to get up?
So I get up around 2:15 every day.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And
sometimes
then
I go to bed. Sometimes I go to bed at 2:15. So how has that worked as a mom to two boys? And, I think you said they're 13 and 10 now,
13
right?
and 10.
So they're a little more self-sufficient, but back when they were really little, how did you make that work?
So when they were little, it actually truthfully was easier. And I was really fortunate. My kids are both really good sleepers.
That's good.
And we have a lot of structure in our house, a lot of boundaries, a lot of scheduling because of primarily, truthfully, because of my job. So when they were small, like they were very predictable in terms of when they went to bed and what time they got up and that kind of thing. It's a little bit more challenging now, Melissa, now that they're older because their needs are different. And because they know when I'm not really there. Because you can be there with your kids, but you're not really there.
Yeah.
And they know, and they'll call you on it because they might see that you've glanced at the phone or that you're listening, but you're not really listening, that kind of thing. So I find now I have to really check myself more than I used to when I would just fall asleep reading them a book, midway through, like all parents do.
Skip a few pages.
Exactly. Now, now their needs are different. So now I'm very aware of time. So it's funny, like I thought that it would, foolishly thought that it would get easier as I got older. And I don't think that's necessarily true. Yeah. But they can do other things for themselves. Like we're chatting on a weekday night and, dinner is out there and I've told them to go help themselves. So they're good with that. That kind of thing. That kind of thing they can do, which is nice.
That's funny because, I think to myself now with a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old, I have 2 boys and I think, oh, well, this will be, it'll be easier when they get older, but I always forget that there's a challenge in every season. So
yes, that's such a good way to put it.
Yeah,
too.
they really are, they're just as joyful, I'm sure, but different seasons have different challenges.
Yeah, and I think I'm a boy mom too, and I think as they get older, it gets a little louder, and the man-on-man action when they want to fight over something becomes far more aggressive. So I think it's always, each stage is really fun, and I know that I miss the last stage after I get through it. But I do find that now I feel this pressure to really not miss out on those moments because now that you have a 13-year-old, that's 7th grade, so you're middle school, with all the, drama-rama of middle school, and high school's right around the corner, and you start doing that counting thing where you think, well, we've only got 6 more spring breaks. We only have 6 more Christmases until he goes to college and, all that kind of thing. So I want to make sure that I'm there for those moments. And, I would love them to remember me fondly from this time too.
Right.
At least a little bit.
Right. Which I'm sure they will. I'm sure they will.
So
what hacks do you implement for yourself and for your family to kind of get through and to make it work with the schedules that you have and all of the things that you're involved with, not only professionally, but with your boys?
So I am obsessively prepared. and that is in terms of work and in terms of home. So I am a big fan of not leaving things to chance. So, for example, I'll give you like my morning routine. Before I go to bed at night, I lay everything out. And I'm not talking about just like putting out your clothes and stuff. I actually lay everything out. Like next to the sink, I've got the toothbrush, the toothpaste, the contacts, the face wash, whatever I need to get ready, it's already out. So I've eliminated the steps of having to open the drawer and take things out, because at 2:15 in the morning, it's an extra step. And I have found that simplifying those things cuts a couple of minutes. And for me, it makes it easy, and I think people might look at that and go, well, that's a little much, but it works. But it works.
It works. Don't question it if it works.
Don't question it. And I've taught my kids to do the same thing. You need your glasses in the morning. You need your toothbrush. Why don't you put this out? You don't have to think about it. Because when I don't have to think about it, then I don't have to worry that it won't get done or it won't get done right. And that means that if something does come up, I've got a few extra minutes to deal with it. I do a lot of the tricks that a lot of my mom friends do in terms of having food ready. I find I don't want to eat junk. I hate eating junk. I hate the kids eating junk, because you don't feel good when you do that. So I'm a big fan of the very boring food prep stuff. And I do it and I have it out so that if we need to make a meal quickly, we can have a good meal, because I don't want to miss out on it just because I'm getting up at a weird hour, that kind of thing. So, those little things are huge. I'd say another hack I have is I use time where I steal time from other places, so if my kids are in one of their activities, like say swimming, I have a son who swims, I have a whole group of friends whose kids all swim, and that's how we all met. And we use that time to work out together. So that's our social time.
Oh, that's smart.
So I don't really have a whole lot of time to do lunch. Plus, when you get up at 2:15, lunch is like at 9:30 in the morning.
When everyone else is eating breakfast.
Exactly. Nobody wants to eat with you at that time. But my other mom friends who are really busy, we do love to work out. And we love to work out together. So we'll drop the kids off at swim, and then we go hit the trails together. So I get a 2-for-1 out of it. So
I love
those are my little hacks. That way I don't feel like I'm missing out on other things. It requires a lot of scheduling, and scheduling is super boring, isn't it? But it works.
It works. So are you
it works.
Yes. Are you a paper planner or an electronic? Do you like to use, something that you buy online and it comes in the mail and you use your stickers and your pens and all of that? Or do you put everything into some sort of electronic calendar?
What do you think I'm going to say?
I feel like you're going to say electronic.
I do both.
Because
I do both.
You are so busy. I think that you need it right there at your fingertips.
I actually do both. So I haven't, and I always have. I've had it like a true planner that you write in, and then I input it into the phone as well. Okay. But I live by the paper planner still. Yeah. I love it. And I write all kinds of stuff into it. And I think that the act, for me anyway, I'm a Gen Xer, so I've had like a foot in both worlds. For me, the writing of something is what reinforces it in my memory.
Yeah, me too.
And I'm also a very visual person, so I like to write myself little notes about things. And so I find that for me is best. But I need both. And I was thrilled to go to Office Max this year in December and see that the rest of the world is starting to see things the way I do. Because now there are all these like really cute paper planners.
Oh, I know. It's hard to make a decision now.
I know. It's fantastic. So I really actually like both. But I also use a lot of technology as well. I mean, I set alarms and alerts and reminders. And I think it's great. I think that the key is that you've got to find something that works for you.
Yeah.
And then you have to be consistent with it.
Yes.
And if you're not, is where you get into trouble.
Yeah. Because then it won't work for you.
Then it doesn't work for you. Yeah. Exactly.
So you mentioned working out, and from what I've gathered, you run 50 somethings. I don't know if it's 50 mile. My mind was just blown when I saw the number 50. So talk to me about this and tell me what this is that you do, because I can barely run. I'm a Peloton girl all day long, but when it comes to running, I'm out. So tell us about running. And have you always been a runner? Is this
I've been a
something
runner.
that you
Yeah.
just kind of fell in love with, or
Yeah,
tell us about this
I'm either in
journey.
love with it or I hate it, depending on the day. But primarily, I love it. I've been running for, probably the last 25 years, seriously. And I absolutely adore it. I love running marathons. I like distance stuff. I like endurance running. And maybe that's part of the kind of sadistic thing about working the hours that I do. I like a little bit of suffering, clearly, to have done it for as long as I have. But I have been doing marathons for a long time. And I've recently, in the last 5-6 years, started doing 50Ks, which are ultra runs, which are done out on the trails. So down in the dirt where you are, running through mountains and on single track trail, and it's super fun. And I actually do these races now. I do these 50K races with that group of girlfriends I was just talking about.
Okay.
So these are all my fellow swim gym moms, and we go out, and the joke is we go out to do these 31-mile races. And the longer it takes us to do the race, the bigger the break we get from the kids that day. So there's very little motivation to hurry that thing along. But it's really fun because, you're outside, and it's in some ways it's very childlike, because it reminds you a lot of when you were a kid and you just went out and played and you laughed and you ran and you got dirty and you had snacks. And that's what a trail run is like, one of these ultra races. So I have found that they are a tremendous stress reliever for me. I can have a really challenging, hard day at work where maybe the topics that we were talking about in the morning news were really tough to take. And I leave from work, I go for a run before I even go home. I shake the day, I hit the reset. And then when I walk in the door to school to do school pickup and to start the rest of my day, I feel fresh and my mind feels cleansed and I'm in the right place to then be in mom mode.
Yeah.
I think it's really important to be able to separate the two. And for me, I have found that a good sweaty run is what it takes. And it really works quick.
Yeah, that's amazing. So through your 20-year career with this, being the morning news anchor at this station, which, like you said, is kind of a unicorn in this industry. What have you had any mentors, or is there anyone who has kind of guided you, and what has that looked like during your career so far?
So I have had a handful of mentors, and I have a theory that you need a couple of women in your life. I think you need a mentor who is 10 years ahead of you in your industry. I think you need a mentor who is 10 years behind you in your industry, because they help you see your industry with fresh eyes, which I think is really critical and helps you navigate generational differences in an office. And then I think you need to be a mentor to people, whether they're older, younger, less, or more experienced. So I have one particular mentor who has been a great sounding board for me over the years. And when I've run into challenges or frustrations and I've called this person and I've said, here's what I'm dealing with, she has either talked me off the ledge or told me to take the jump. And sometimes that's good, because chances are that she dealt with something similar, that maybe the names were different, the location was different, but the feeling that you had was the same. And I think that's really good to remember that, sometimes you go through these ebbs and flows in your career, and they're very similar to what other people have gone through. And sometimes you just want to hear that it's okay to feel or react to something a certain kind of way. So I have definitely reached out to women, and it's important to be able to find somebody who has your best interests at heart. Right. And I've also found it's good to have a mentor who doesn't live where you live, who doesn't know the characters involved, because they tend to be a little bit more objective. And that's important. I don't need someone to take my side. I just want somebody to listen and to tell me if what I'm experiencing or feeling or questioning or dreaming about is a reasonable thing.
That's really important. And so it sounds like you reached out to someone And was this something that kind of developed naturally, or was it more formal, I guess, for lack of a better word?
Oh, I think just naturally.
I need a mentor.
No. And you know what's so funny is I don't know that I would ever use that word with any of the people that I was just describing. Like I would say, you are my mentor.
Right.
I think they would probably know that is how I view them. But I think it's a difficult thing, and especially in certain industries, certainly law is probably one of them where people are very competitive.
Yes.
I think sometimes it's hard to reach out to somebody and ask for help because you might fear that it might be seen as a sign of weakness.
Right.
And I think certainly broadcasting is a extraordinarily competitive industry as well. But that's why I say, like, when you meet people who you can tell are rooting for you and who are kind, you got to hang on to people like that. But then you also have to be that person for someone else as well.
Right.
And so I had, and it really was through my Olympic experiences, I had an opportunity to meet women from all over the country who were more experienced than me. And it was very clear when somebody wanted to take you under their wing and show you how to do something, whether it was doing something in a faster way or a different kind of a way. I mean, I just got exposed to so many people from all over the country that I found that I could I was gravitating towards certain people. And I just started asking for help. Like, how would you do this? How do you do it where you work?
Yeah.
How would you react to this situation?
Right.
And honestly, the greatest thing that I got from some of them was an acknowledgement that the job that I had and the position that I had and the company I was working for was a really good situation. And sometimes that's really great because a lot of people need to leave a job to find out that what they had was good.
Right.
And for somebody from the outside to go, wow, you have a really good setup. That is a really good gig you got, was really a great affirmation for me. And it's really nice to be able to be content and be in the moment and to say, this is good. And I'm okay with that.
And that's how you've been there for 20 years.
It's a big part of it. I mean, there are a few other factors too, of course.
Yeah.
But it's, I think I've been able to look at what I'm doing and figure out what else would I like to do and still be able to do it where I live. And it's been a good reminder to me along the way that you don't always have to go to bigger or different places to do big things.
Yeah.
So if you are somebody who can challenge themselves and can dream big things and find people to help you do those big things, you might be fortunate enough to be able to stay where you are. Yeah. And for me, I've been able to do that, which is wonderful because I love where I live and I really love the people that I work with. I love the station that I work for. Mm-hmm. And it really became home to me. But at the same time, I've got that itch where I want to be doing other things. I want to be doing bigger things. I want to be doing different challenges. I am always reinventing. And that's just me. That is just a me thing. And it's still been a good fit for me to be able to do that here.
I think that's great. So let's talk about that because I'm sitting here listening to you say that and I'm thinking about my work as, a career services dean and the students and graduates that I work with and other moms that I know. And I think a lot of people, whether male or female, they often think that in order to set new goals for themselves professionally, they have to change jobs. So they have to put themselves in a new position professionally in order to reach some new goal that they have in mind. So you've obviously been able to transition and grow and expand your professional, accomplishments while you've been at this station for so long. So how have you continued to set goals for yourself while you have been able to stay at the same, employer for 20 years, yet you kind of referenced that you've been able to do this, but I guess very tangibly, how have you been able to set goals and then reach those goals without changing jobs?
Such a good question. So I have been told that I quite frequently start sentences with, I have this idea.
I'm also guilty of that.
Which
totally
tends
understand.
to raise the blood pressure of a lot of people around you.
Yes.
But I am always coming up with ideas. And so part of it is that technology has made it doable to do that. Because if there's something I want to learn about or do, I can figure out how to do it. So, for example, podcasting, you probably didn't grow up podcasting. None of us did.
Nope.
But I bet with a couple of Google searches, you were on your way. And so for me, even working in traditional broadcasting for all these years, podcasting was something that I was intrigued by because I am a consumer of podcasts. I love listening to podcasts. And I thought, well, I want to do that. And so I brought the idea to my company and said, I really feel like we should be in this space. We do all these other things, but this is the one part of the digital space that we're not in. So that's an example of, trying to figure out a different way to do things. In my industry also in the last 20 years, technology has radically changed the way we communicate with our customers. So, through social media, through websites, through blogs, through Facebook Live, through any kind of streaming service, the way we tell stories has changed. So rather than be somebody who doesn't want to change, I've tried to be somebody who leads the change. And my feeling's always been, well, why not? Because I don't want to keep doing the same thing. Because in essence, my job every day is I read out loud. I come in and essentially, if I was to give somebody a job description, this is the job description I truly gave to first graders when I did a school tour recently. I read out loud. That's it. I read out loud about car crashes and weather and presidents and all kinds of things. But essentially, I read out loud for a living.
Yes.
So doing all of these other things is what makes it really fun and interesting to me. I also do a lot of writing. And so now I can write with a different voice. The story that I write for television that airs in a 6 p.m. newscast is very different than the blog-like social media posts that I might do on Facebook.
Right.
And so they're reaching the same audience, but in a completely different kind of way. And it's using different parts of my brain. So for me, completely challenged and getting to do new things. And so I think, if I'm running a TV station, I like people like that. I don't want every single person to be like that because that would be exhausting. But you need to have people who really want to kind of push the thresholds of how an industry has always functioned. And I enjoy being that kind of a person. And certainly being on our Olympic team all these years has allowed me to do that in a huge way and around the world and in a completely different setting. I'll give you an example. When Facebook Live came into play a couple of years ago, we were sitting on a bus in Rio de Janeiro. It was 1 or 2 in the morning, and we were, just killing time. And so we came up with this concept. We said, we should do a whole Facebook Live show about what it's like to ride the media bus. It became the biggest thing that we did at the Olympics.
Oh, that's awesome.
And there was people kept talking about the bus show and how do you produce the bus show? I said, there's no producing of it. It's sitting in the back of the bus and seeing if you have a Wi-Fi signal.
Right.
But people loved it. So, it's
that
funny,
is awesome.
these things that people think take all this planning and preparation and everything else. Sometimes it's just kind of dumb luck and you just kind of hit something and it ends up being that thing that either you get remembered for or that has an opportunity to just kind of light that fire, that creative fire that you might have.
That's so funny. So you started a podcast, as you mentioned, and it's called Dying to Ask. So tell us a little bit about your podcast, and then I have a question for you about podcasting. But at first, I want you to tell us about your podcast first.
So Dying to Ask is the idea of how does somebody come up with an idea and then actually pull it off? Because for years as a reporter, I would reporters and photographers almost always drive Ford Explorers. For whatever reason, that's like the news car of choice, a white Ford Explorer. And so we would sit there and for 8 hours, we'd be out on a story and you spend a lot of time talking to photographers. And the entire time we would come up with ideas like, oh, we should do this. Or what if somebody came up with an idea to do that? But we never do any of those ideas. We never actually pull any of those ideas off. So I've always been obsessed with people who actually follow through and make their idea a reality. So that was my premise behind Dying to Ask. So the idea is that we talk to authors and influencers, celebrities, maybe sports figures who had an idea, figured out the work it would take to do it, and then actually put it out there in the universe and made a difference by actually doing it.
That is so cool.
It's really fun.
What amazing stories you probably hear. So what has been your favorite thing about podcasting so far?
Oh my gosh, my favorite thing is that it's so casual.
Yeah.
It is, because when I am, as I told you, reading out loud in the morning, I can't be too casual.
Right.
But when you and I are sitting here talking, I mean, I'm sitting on my bed right now, and 5 minutes after you and I hang up, I will be asleep. I guarantee you that. And I love that you can have this really great conversation. And for me, where most of my television stories probably don't run longer than about a minute and a half, podcasts might go for 30, 40 minutes. And in 30 or 40 minutes, you really get a chance to learn.
Yeah.
And so that's what I love about podcasts, is that they've opened up this whole world to me, many worlds really to me, where I've wanted to learn, whether I wanted to learn about finance or history, sports, you name it. I feel like I can, through my podcast app, teach myself in a very short period of time. So I love having these conversations and, gleaning something from somebody I might not actually have the opportunity to meet in person, but through this incredible medium, you have the chance to at least get a little glimpse into their life. And maybe there's something that they do that you think, oh, I'm going to try that. Or you're inspired by it. Or maybe there's something you do and you go, I'm never doing that.
Yeah.
Fool me
glad
once.
they tried it first, right?
I'm glad I learned from that Fitzpatrick girl. I don't need to do that.
That's funny. Well, I completely agree. And that's I was so curious to hear as a news anchor, how the two compared. And that's really interesting because I would not have, I don't think, naturally thought of that being the difference, but it makes complete sense that, being a news anchor and, like you said, reading these 30-second, 90-second clips of just what's in front of you is so, doesn't give you any room for just casual conversation and really getting to know people.
And it's funny because when you go out and you do television stories, like if I go out, say if I'm at the Olympics and I'm doing a profile of an athlete, a profile of a figure skater, let's say,
ding, ding,
you
ding.
you might spend 20 or 30 minutes talking to them in the course of that story, shooting videos and doing interviews in a variety of locations. The reality is that like 1 minute out of that 30 minutes you spent with them will actually end up on a television.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the other 29 minutes can be fascinating, but it wasn't the very best stuff.
Right.
So that's kind of the nice thing, is that you have a chance to, you get that first answer, but that first answer leads you to the next two questions. And sometimes it's the next two questions after that where you really get so deep into something that the conversation just becomes so enriched. So it's just a different way of communicating with people. Yeah. And it's, I don't know, it just talks to you in a different kind of way. I have loved it. Loved it. It has added such a fire to what I'm doing right now. Mm-hmm. I truly enjoy it. I love how, I don't find the conversations hard, but I do find that, like, for me, what's different is the promotion of it. I've never worked in promoting a product before. That's very foreign to me. The idea of going out and pursuing an interview and chatting with somebody and thinking of questions that you hope will be interesting to an audience, that part of it is great. That I can do in my sleep. But the idea of trying to get people to listen to it.
After you've put in all that work.
I have, in all these years, I've never had to do that because people just turn on a TV in the morning and they probably turn it on to the same channel that they watched the day before. Yeah. That's how television works. So I've kind of enjoyed having to be creative to figure out how to market a product like that. So that's good. I'm learning new tricks, and that's a good thing.
There you go. Always growing and learning.
Always growing and learning.
That's funny. So let's talk about the Olympics. So I'm curious, because you've covered both summer and winter. And this is not honing down on any particular Olympic games, but just between the two, if you had to pick, what's your favorite, summer or winter Olympics?
Boy.
And it's like choosing children. Probably,
it kind of is. Probably summer is a little bit more comfortable to work in because we spend so much, and I guess I might have to go to that. We spend so much time outside at the Olympics.
Yeah.
That from a gear standpoint and just a physical comfort standpoint, it's probably easier to work in the Summer Olympics.
Yeah.
although that can have its challenges as well, depending on where they are.
Yeah.
Like for example,
going from one extreme to the other.
This time last year I was in Pyeongchang, South Korea, and there was the first or second day I was reporting, it was -11. The wind chill was 40 below. And I had to stand outside and, we have 30 television stations and we carry around this backpack that's full of mic flags. So when you see a television reporter holding up a microphone and you see that little cube that has the call letters of the TV station, I had a backpack that had 30 of those for stations around the country. So there's a part in the TV story, it's called a stand up. That's where the reporter stands up and holds the microphone and says something. And you get the brand identification of the television station. That's what promotes the TV station. Well, all 30 of our stations want to see that little cube. So I had to stand there and say my 2 sentences, and I had to change that cube out, which requires that you take the microphone apart. It's a 3-step process. Take the microphone apart, put the cube on, stand back up, get framed up in the camera, say the 2 sentences, and then repeat for 30 times, which it's mind-numbing at times, but when you added in the fact that it was 11 below, 40 below with the wind chill, the wind was whipping, and my mouth was freezing, I thought, I'm not going to survive this one. This is it. This is the one that does me in. So we found the photographer that I work with at the Olympics, a guy named Mike Domalog. We've gone to all 10 together. I would get to the point where he said, I can't even understand the words. Your mouth is frozen. You're going to have to go back into the car. So I would get back into the car, warm up, and then I would come back out and I could get maybe another 4 of them out. And we'd get back in the car, warm up.
That's so funny.
That's an example of what it's like in a Winter Olympics. But they're all fun in their own kind of way. And the Olympics is just, it's such I love what the Olympics stands for. You have these people, mainly, kids, teenagers or young 20-somethings who have worked for a decade or sometimes an entire lifetime for maybe one day or maybe a minute and a half. If you're a skater, it's like a 2-minute performance tops, right? Yeah. And the idea that somebody works that long and that hard and it all comes down to just that one moment is absolutely addictive to me. Like I will watch any Olympic sport. I will talk to any Olympic athlete because I find them so fascinating.
So who is the most fascinating athlete that you've met?
Oh my gosh. No, that's a hard one.
Yeah. I'm sure there's a lot of them.
That's a hard one. It's never the big names. It's not like a Michael Phelps or a Lindsey Vonn. You know what they're like, and they have entire villages that are behind them. That make sure that they have everything that they need. I'm far more interested in the people whose names you will not remember 2 weeks after the closing ceremony.
Yeah,
I really am, because to me, like, that is true love of the game. If you are willing
underdogs.
The total underdogs and the people who, they delay a lot of like real life experiences, like, jobs and family and all that stuff in pursuit of a goal. That's the one that gets me. I think one of my favorites from last time was Keegan Randall, who was the cross country skier. Mm-hmm. Do you remember the cross country skiing team? They won for the first time. The women won for the first time in 42 years.
Yes.
And the idea that anybody would go into a sport where the U.S. had not won in 42 years in the Olympics.
Especially cross-country skiing.
Especially cross-country. Like, how hopeful a person do you have to be be able to do that? And their answer was very, very hopeful, and they won gold. And that was just the most remarkable thing ever. So I love those stories. Those are the ones that, to me, are just incredible. Because, most of those people, they go back to a very normal life after that. And it is not necessarily the most defining thing that they'll ever do, but it sure was an incredible moment.
Yeah. I think now, so, I've followed the Winter Olympics especially very closely, essentially all my life because of my figure skating days. Yeah. And, when I was younger and I could associate more with the 14-year-olds and the 16-year-olds because I was that age, that was who I kind of related to. But now that I'm a mom and I see these women go out there to the Olympics and they have kids and they're 30 and 40 years old, you hear these stories throughout the Olympics sometimes of these moms. And I just think, I can't even get lunch made sometimes. And they're like out there just, kicking rear end at the Olympics in these sports and winning medals. And even if they don't win a medal, they are at the Olympics and I'm at home just trying to get the laundry done.
Yeah, no kidding.
And so that's always fascinating to me now that I'm a mom, to watch these moms who have committed themselves to this goal and their whole this is a whole family event for them to
Well, it is. And
be pursuing this.
And there aren't too many. I always look for that mom story at the Olympics. And I think it was in 2016. I want to say there were 10 moms on Team USA out of a couple of hundred athletes.
Yeah.
And it's not very many, but think about it. I mean, once you get to be in a position where you want to have a child, life gets very expensive very quickly.
Right.
And it's very hard to justify the time that it takes to train if you don't have big sponsors.
Right.
And so it is very unusual to be able to do that. And there tend to be obviously, a few more dads, but not a whole lot of parents in general. I mean, it's very difficult. I mean, to be an Olympian means you have to be selfish to a degree time-wise.
Yeah.
And, it might be selfish in terms of putting school on hold or not being able to go do a full-time job or pursuing something, pursuing extra training time, which is very hard to do because of the amount of time that most of them put into it.
Yeah.
But it sure is motivating when a mom wins. I mean, I'm thinking of like Carrie Walsh Jennings. And,
yes.
Oh my gosh, she's incredible. She has 3 kids. Kim Rhodey, you might remember her. She's a 6-time Olympian. She won her 6th medal in Rio, and she had a 2-year-old son. Yeah, Carter, I think was his name. Yeah, she had a 2-year-old son at the time. So, it's not impossible, but it is improbable for a lot of them to be able to do it.
And so for them to get there, you just think, wow, all the things that they have been through and all the pieces that have fallen into place for them, they are meant to be here.
Well, and truthfully, all the people who have helped them along the way.
Exactly.
All the people who have helped them. And, I would, obviously not an Olympian, but an Olympic reporter, I certainly have had those people who have made it possible for me to continue pursuing my goals of covering that as a sport. When I go to the Olympics, I leave for a month, and I have, my husband, God love him. He has a job. He's got a lot of stuff going on, but he's held down the fort so that I can disappear for a month and be able to go do that. And, while I am working hard and I'm working 21 hours a day and I'm working 32 days straight, I am at the Olympics. So
yes.
There is that.
You got to get some cool points, at least with your kids on that one, right?
I get some cool points, and especially if you bring back some good souvenirs.
Yeah, there you go. So what do you hope that your boys will learn from seeing you as their mom work so hard towards your own goals and professionally, in your success as a news anchor and as a podcaster and all the other, as a runner, all the things that you've committed yourself to as Deirdre? Mm-hmm. What do you hope that they will learn from that?
That's a hard question to answer.
Yeah.
I hope that what they'll see is maybe not me as much as a woman, but me as a parent and their dad as a parent, and seeing that it takes commitment professionally and personally to live a deep and fulfilling life.
Yes.
And you have to be able to set your own boundaries and your own goals and your own hopes and dreams. And then you have to figure out how to do the work to get there.
Yeah.
And I hope that they see that it's not easy. I feel like a lot of times that, I know I sometimes I'll have younger women in my profession who will approach me who are thinking about having a baby. This happened recently. 30-ish woman called me, and I didn't know her very well. She was from one of the other stations in town, and it was very clear she was thinking about starting a family. And so she wanted to pick my brain. She wanted to know how I do things. And as I started to answer some of her questions, I could tell that I was absolutely killing her baby buzz because she was seeing all sorts of things that she did not realize that I would do. And, my reality is that it's not easy. Life isn't easy. Right. It is not easy to be tired and to be a mom. It's not easy to be tired and to have a job, or tired to get up to read out loud for a living.
Yeah.
It's not easy, but just because it's not easy doesn't mean it's not worth it and that it's not fulfilling. And so, her question to me when she asked me this, she said, well, I never see you talk about any of those things on social media. And I said, well, why would anybody want to hear what a crummy day I had?
Yeah.
Sometimes things are just hard, but you got to figure out your own way to get through them and know that at the end of the day that it's all worth it in the end.
Yeah.
And so I think I would hope the same kind of thing for my kids, that they see that life isn't always easy, but it is worth it when you're on the same page as a partner and you have these shared goals and these hopes for your family. And when those small moments come together into a really beautiful life, that you appreciate it.
I think that's great. And I bet that they will. I mean, they've been around this with you, and it sounds like your husband is so supportive.
He's fantastic.
Yeah. So I'm sure
as he would tell you, he's amazing.
Well, that's important, and it's good that he knows it, right? So what's next for you? As we start to wrap up, what's on the horizon for you, and what goals do you have coming up?
So, I've been thinking a lot about that lately. And, I have always be changing is kind of one of my goals.
Mm-hmm.
Always be learning, always been trying something different. I've had a goal in the back burner to write a book for years. I have started 3, and I have gotten probably a third to halfway through all 3, but I haven't finished it. So getting back to my podcast theme of following something through to reality, that's a big goal of mine. And it's been on my back for years to do that. So I've really committed to, in the next year or two, that is something. And it may be, Melissa, I'm not any good at it. I don't know, but I haven't followed through. So that is one goal, is to actually follow through with this and to at least complete it, because it's something I've been wanting to do for a long time.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I look forward to following that journey and finding out if you follow through and what the outcome is, because I'm sure it'll be fantastic. So tell us, so that we can follow along, where can people find you and follow along on your journey and find your podcasts and all of those things?
Oh, so my favorite place to be on social media these days is actually Instagram. I think Instagram is just silly fun.
Yes.
And you'll find me on Instagram at Run, Read, Sip. I love to run. Well, we talked about that. I'm a big reader. And I like my wine, so it's Run, Read, Sip on Instagram. And then the podcast is called Dying to Ask, and you can find it by searching Dying to Ask. We're on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and all those other podcasty places.
Wonderful. Well, Deirdre, thank you so much for being on this podcast and for sharing your story as a busy working mom. And I love your hacks. I feel inspired to go lay out toothbrushes and all of those things tonight so that we can be ready for the day tomorrow. And I just am so grateful for the insight that you've shared about your journey as a working mom and the inspiration that I think you're going to give to the moms who are listening. So thanks,
Melissa.
Much. This
I'm
has
telling
been
you,
fun.
The toothbrush thing sounds ridiculous, but it does save 30 seconds. And at the end of the day, that's worth it.
Hey, it all adds up, It
all adds up.
Sometimes when my son walks into his class, probably 30 seconds late, I think to myself, where could we have found those 30 seconds otherwise? So.
Exactly.
Well, thank you again, Deirdre. This has been so much fun. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in for another inspiring episode of the Influential Motherhood podcast. Be sure to follow my own journey in motherhood and work at Melissa Duncan JD on Instagram, and follow the behind the scenes of the podcast at Influential Motherhood on Instagram and Facebook. If you're enjoying the Influential Motherhood podcast, please take a second to leave a rating or review in iTunes. It is how you can help other moms find the show so they can be inspired by these stories. See you next week.